Being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis is a scary thing, and patients who hear that diagnosis are often confused and anxious about what to do next. Patients like Cathy Chester will tell you that it's important for you to take control of the visits with your physician and other healthcare providers. Be sure to ask the questions that you want answered in order to feel comfortable about what's going to happen and what you can do to best take care of your disease.
I'm here today because I have multiple sclerosis, but my diagnosis is not all of who I am. I'm a wife, a mother, a daughter-in-law, a sister-in-law, and a friend. I have hopes and dreams to lead a fulfilling life, and I am also one of 2.5 million people worldwide who also live with multiple sclerosis, who hang on to their hopes and dreams despite the unpredictability of this disease. I want to share with you today what I've learned over the years of living with multiple sclerosis, and I want you to learn from my story the importance of taking an active role with your medical team and with your world. As a child, I wanted to be a writer. I kept a journal and I would create stories about faraway places of kings and palaces and all those things that little girls dream about. I loved imagining what my life would be when I was a grown-up. I loved Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice. And of course, I loved the exciting and the handsome Mr. Darcy, who was one of the protagonists of that story. And I wanted to have someone sweep me off my feet, just like Mr. Darcy did. I wanted my happily ever after. Looking back, I think that my young imagination served me well over the years during great times of stress, because I could hide in those stories where I would dream my dreams and escape in them as I needed them. But I also think that being a dreamer made it quite difficult to face the reality that was headed my way. When I was in my 20s, I was naive and I felt invincible. Illness never crossed my mind. In 1981, I was fresh out of college with a degree in English and business, and I was thrilled to land my dream job of working for a large publishing house in Manhattan. It was an exciting time to be young and single. Manhattan was my playground, and I was having the time of my life. I loved my job, I loved my friends, and I loved having my own apartment right across the Hudson River. One day, I was invited to go to Vermont with a few friends. It was a very snowy day, and when I got there, we decided to go into town and have some fun. We got into the car. I was in the back seat. And we went across one of the many bridges that Vermont is known for, the one-way bridges that you had to wait for the other car to come through. So we started crawling across the bridge, and another car was headed toward us. The only thing that I remember is my friend screaming out and then waking up on a stretcher headed for the local hospital. I had a concussion, and I had 16 stitches in my forehead. That is now my own scarlet letter. My feet were completely numb. My parents drove up to pick me up and bring me home. They were quite worried about how I was, and they admitted me to the local hospital. The tests were clear. Everything was okay, except my feet were completely numb. They took me to our family doctor, who told me that my shoes were too tight. I didn't feel comfortable with that diagnosis. What did that mean, my shoes were too tight? I couldn't walk, I couldn't feel anything, but I said nothing, and I returned to work. Eventually, I met a man and fell in love, my own Mr. Darcy. We got engaged. It was a magical time in my life. I could no longer ignore my feet. They were so numb, I couldn't feel them. And it was very difficult to walk. My right hand was also equally numb, and it was very hard to write or to use it in many ways. I was tired beyond comprehension despite a full night's sleep. So one day, as I was headed home to my apartment, I was walking in my heels, and I noticed that I was kind of walking crooked, and I couldn't imagine what that feeling was. Why was I walking this way? Well, I looked down, and one of my shoes had come off my feet, and I hadn't even felt it. I looked back a few feet, and there was my shoe. I was so upset. I went to our family doctor, and he said to go see a neurologist, who told me after a few tests that I had something called multiple sclerosis. My mother was with me, and she was ashen-faced, and I felt that I had to be strong for her and for my family. I felt that I had to be strong for everyone, and I remained silent and kept my feelings to myself. Then my fiance came to see me, and I asked him, "Do you want to stay or do you want to go? I would totally understand if you wanted to leave." And his answer, thank God, was, "A life without you is no life at all." But what was MS? What did it mean? You have to remember that this was 1986 in the dark ages, where there was no internet and there were no medications that were FDA approved. So my parents took me into New York City to get a second opinion. He also, doctor, told me that I had multiple sclerosis beyond a shadow of a doubt. But he piped up and said, "There'll be a cure in 5 years." I did no research. I didn't look into what he said. I took his word at face value without doing any research. I was silent. The doctor told me to go home and rest. And if I had an exacerbation, to call him, and he would give me steroids. It just didn't feel right to me. Something was missing. I wanted to resume my life. I wanted to get back in the game. But what did I do? I quit my job. I moved out of my apartment and moved back home with my parents. People hovered over me. They helped me cross the street. They treated me like a China doll. They told me to rest. They stared at me when I walked. This didn't feel right to me. I didn't want to be made to feel disabled. Yet, I didn't want to hurt anyone's feeling. What they were doing was out of love, and I knew that. But I stayed silent, and I didn't stay true to myself. I didn't listen to that little voice that was screaming inside of my head to rally and say something. I finally decided to go to an MS comprehensive care center, where the people there were extraordinary, and they rallied around me to take good care of me. They only saw people with MS, and they knew exactly what to say to me. They were a medical team that nurtured me and loved me. They became my second family. They helped me manage my disease emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And what the nurse practitioner there told me was something that I live by. They were the most powerful words she could have said. She said, "Do not allow your MS to be the sum total of who you are." Wow. The time came when we wanted to start a family, and my husband and I had talked about it for a while, but it was hard to find anyone that was focusing on pregnancy and MS. You go to the library, and there was no information there about it. So I finally found someone who would be speaking about it, but she was about 90 minutes away. So I got in the car, my mom came, and we drove up to hear this woman speak. And she was brilliant. And she basically said there was nothing wrong with pregnancy and MS. But I didn't ask her questions. I didn't go beyond hearing her say what the genetic risks were of having a child when you have MS. I should have asked the doctor. I remained silent. I had 2 miscarriages. 2 miscarriages. That was devastating, and it was emotionally draining. 2 miscarriages, 2 rounds of steroids. The next pregnancy was a charm. It was beautiful. I had been driving with hand controls, and using a cane to walk. And when I got pregnant, that all disappeared. So I had a perfect pregnancy and childbirth. And I just always wanted to thank my hormones for that. Happy family, happy, healthy baby. Years passed and I wanted to find a doctor closer to me. I went to one that was highly recommended by several people. And I went to him and I sat in his office and I sat with my little list of questions. And he basically shook my hand, sat at his laptop, and typed in all the information about me. He never looked up. He never gave me eye-to-eye contact. He never asked me a question. He gave me a subpar examination. He didn't give me all the parts of the examination that I knew that I should be having, because I don't think that he saw me as having any issues. With MS, sometimes the invisible illness doesn't demonstrate exactly what is happening with a patient, and I was one of them. He cut me off at the end of examination and said that that was enough. The exam was over, I was fine. But the lesions on my brain that show up in my MRIs tell a totally different story, and to me, his rudeness was unacceptable. I should have told him the story of me falling down in the middle of a restaurant when I was out to dinner with my friends, of the people at another table rudely laughing at me, at the drunk who just fell down. My friends helped me back up to my feet. I was angry at the person at the restaurant, and I was angry at that doctor. And what did I do? I remained silent. I should have yelled at them that I deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, that I was sick, that I had a disease. I was always taught to be a good girl and to never rock the boat and to never make waves. I allowed them to have the power over me. These were all important lessons to teach me one thing: to trust my instincts, to be my guide. Adversity is often thought of as a bad thing, but I argue that adversity is one of the greatest teachers that we could have. It teaches us to be resilient despite the inevitability of hardships, and it helps us to find our voice, to speak up for what we need. When I reached midlife, I felt empowered, finally empowered, to use my voice, to speak up for what I do need. As a freelance writer and a certified health advocate, I know that using my voice is the greatest gift that I can give myself. Now I can be an active participant in my health care, and I teach others to do the same. We should never give power away to anyone else. The decisions that we make in our life are for our health. I wish I knew that all those years ago, that it's critical to use your voice, to trust your instincts, to be your guide. If something doesn't feel right, speak up, ask questions, rail against intolerance, and question authority. Educate others about creating awareness about MS. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until she's been in a lot of hot water." Well, I must have been in a lot of hot water over the years, because I am stronger today. I wish I knew that 30 years ago, but now I know it is what it is. That life is not a children's story. It's not about kings and palaces, and that it unfolds in ways that we never could have imagined. We have to learn how to bend and not break, and to go with the twists and turns that lie before us. Despite the unpredictable disease of multiple sclerosis, I did find my Mr. Darcy, and I did find the blessings of being with him and creating this wonderful life with him and our son. They love me unconditionally. I will never be silent again, and I'll spend the rest of my life teaching others never to be silent as well. Believe in yourself. Trust your instincts. They will be your guide. Thank you.